President Trump hasn't achieved everything on his campaign wish list as he marks 100 days in office, but as that reality became apparent, he downplayed the importance of the milestone, one that he touted himself as his contract with the American voter. Still, he recorded a message from the White House for the occasion, and he says everything is going smoothly.
My fellow Americans, I truly believe that the first 100 days of my administration has been just about the most successful in our country's history. My administration has brought profound change to Washington. The most fundamental change can be found in the relationship between the people and their government. For too long, politicians cared more about special interests than they did about a very successful future for all Americans. They took our taxpayers' money and sent their jobs and wealth to other countries. Not anymore. From the first day of my administration, I have governed by a simple idea. My only allegiance is to you, our wonderful citizens.
Well, earlier I spoke with Republican and CNN commentator Ben Ferguson, as well as Democratic strategist Jonathan Tasini. We talked about the achievements and failures of Trump's first 100 days in office. Here's our discussion.
I think probably for his supporters, certainly the biggest achievement is going to be, one, the economy, and at the same time, the Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch getting him on the Supreme Court. That was a big victory for him. I think the biggest shortfall right now is still Obamacare repeal and replace. And the president has had a reset on that with Congress. They're still working on this, not putting an arbitrary deadline as they did last time of trying to rush this in 17 days. That was a big, big, big failure by Paul Ryan. Now it seems they've got their game together a little bit more, and they're working together to hear everybody's concerns, and they'll probably get a vote on this. So I think that's probably where he's got to prove by the end of this year that he can get a deal done on that, on health care. Otherwise, many people up for re-election in 2 years or a year and a half now, they're going to be in serious trouble.
Absolutely. Jonathan, to you, biggest failure, biggest achievement?
Well, I'll start with the biggest achievement, which I believe I'll agree with Ben on one, which is Gorsuch ramming him onto the Supreme Court. Essentially, the Republicans stole that Supreme Court
Not
seat,
ramming it.
And
Come on.
And you will remember going back, Lynda, and your international viewers remember that Obama tried to appoint someone, Merrick Garland, to the Supreme Court, and essentially Mitch McConnell blocked that. So it was an achievement. They stole that seat. That was an achievement. I have to give them credit. On the economy, I mean, 0.7% growth in the first 3 months. Donald Trump has been a failure, as he has been a failure in business. On the failures, though, I would say the failures, I would say, Lynda, are actually good things. Donald Trump is a hardcore bigot and racist. And one of the things that happened, which he failed, which is the travel ban, which attacked people of faith, Muslims all over the world, many of your viewers, that was a failure. And the reason that was a failure is that people are rising up in this country. People are rebelling. They flooded into airports, and they really forced the Attorney General of Washington State to take a step to block that. And I think that was a failure, but a good failure for America.
Well, so far in the first 100 days, we've seen a lot of protests. President Trump continues to be having the lowest approval rating of any president in the first 100 days. He had no political experience coming into this, but in a very candid interview with Reuters, he reflected on his first 100 days as Commander-in-Chief. Let's just take a listen to what he had to say.
Well, I love my previous life. I loved my previous life. I had so many things going. I actually, this is more work than in my previous life. I thought it would be easier.
I thought it would be easier. Was he a little bit naive going into this job?
Well, if you're asking me, let me offer Donald Trump. I'm willing to offer Donald Trump some career advice. If he would like to resign the presidency and leave us in peace and allow this country to actually flower, I am willing to work with him to get him back to his previous life. I mean, this was kind of funny, Lynda. You may remember it's happened a couple of times. At least when it came to health care, all of a sudden one day, I can't remember what it was in the health care debates, he said, you know what, health care is really difficult. I was really surprised by that, which was kind of shocking because all of us, I've been involved in healthcare policy, healthcare fight for 25 years. And Donald Trump all of a sudden one day woke up and realized it was tough. And the last thing I'll say, and then turn over to Ben, it's partly because he's a complete ignoramus and had no idea, had no sense of domestic and foreign policy. So he walks into a very complicated job and says, oh my God, this is a difficult job.
I have to say, Ben, he has been surprised about how complicated some policies have been.
There's two things here. If you look at tonight, and we just talked about the first 100 days, Democrats are still calling him a bigot, racist, homophobe, hates Muslims, everything else. It's the same playbook that they had that
and the
lost
majority
the election
of people agree.
And allowed,
the majority of people agree with us.
And allowed him to become president of the United States of America. So I hope Democrats keep coming up with the same talking points for the next 4 years.
And Hillary Clinton got 3 million votes. We know that.
Again, we know how the election turned out. You guys can count that and say that somehow it was not fair, but it was a fair and free election, and you just lost because you had a candidate that was untrustworthy, and Democrats said that. Now, let me get back to this other thing real quick about Donald Trump and his comments about the job. Look, I think anybody that goes to Washington that's been in the private sector probably thinks that Washington is going to work a little bit better than it does. There's a reason why Congress, whether Nancy Pelosi is the Speaker of the House or Paul Ryan or John Boehner or Harry Reid's in charge of the Senate, consistently have an approval rating of about 9 to 12%. They are awful at getting their job done.
But Ben, what you're forgetting is no president, Democrat or Republican, has come into the White House and said, oh my God, this is a difficult job. They understood it was complicated.
All right, gentlemen, I'm going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid. Jonathan Tasini and Ben Ferguson, always a pleasure to have you both on. Thanks so much for your enthusiasm. Plenty more to talk about in the next 100 days, no doubt. Thank you.
All right, Lynda, thank you. Thanks, Ben.
Fun discussion there. Well, still ahead, President Trump said no one would be tougher on ISIS than him. We'll see how his plans for fighting ISIS are working out as he marks 100 days in office.